So before that, let's talk about the definition of unemployment. And this is a good example in the case of Indonesia. So the top one is the number of population. Now, I have not updated the data, but this is the data from 2014. So in Indonesia, in 2014, the population size is 254 million. Okay, that's the top one. Now, out of 254 million, some are manpower and some are not manpower. Okay? What is the definition of manpower? The definition of manpower is those whose age is between 15 and 64. That's manpower. Okay? So all of you are manpower because you are between this age, right? And again, in 2014, the data for Indonesia shows that the manpower are 162 million. So out of 254 million population, 162 of the manpower. Okay. So that means the remaining, the difference between 254 and 162 are the non-manpower. Okay. So who are the non-manpower? Well, if you're still younger than 15 years old, or if you're, above 64, okay, then you are not considered as manpower. Now, each country has different definition in terms of manpower, okay, depending on history, culture, and so on. Some countries may be using 10 years old, some countries may be using 17 years old, and also the upper age is also maybe different. Some using 66, some using 60, and so on. Okay, but essentially this is the breakdown of the population into manpower and non-manpower. Now, within the manpower, there are two groups. One is called the labor force, and the other one is the non-labor force. So who are the non-labor force? Well, if you are, let's say, joining the military, then you are not a labor force, even though you are between 15 and 64. Or if you are an unpaid caregivers, that's another example. Basically, it's voluntary workers, right? Informal sector, which is plenty in many developing countries, including Indonesia. So they are not counted as the labor force. That's why they call it non-labor force. Now, this is the controversial thing. Homemakers. So we are talking about mothers. Okay. So many mothers, housewives, they are working. They are within 15 and 64, but they are not counted as the labor force. So what is then the definition of the labor force? The definition of labor force is any manpower who are either active, looking for job, and working, or looking for job but not working. That is the definition of the labor force. And that is the reasons why within the labor force there are two categories, employed and unemployed. But both of them, these two, fall under the category of labor force, who is active. First of all, their age is between 15 and 64, but they are active in the labor market. But some of them are not working, and that falls under the category here. So once you understand this, by the way, the number in Indonesia, again, this is 2014. The number of unemployed is about almost 7 million. Okay, and the number of employed is 115 million. Okay. Now, what is then the unemployment rate? Remember that small u? Yes.
I want to ask, what about unpaid internship? Where does it lay there?
That's a good question. As I said, it depends on each country. It all depends on how the Census Bureau in Indonesia, it's called BPS, right? How the Census Bureau collected the data. When they do the survey or the census, they classify some of the respondents into labor force, some are not into labor force, okay? In some cases, it's very clear, black and white. Like, for example, if join military, that's black and white, it's clear, they are not labor force. Why? Because they are not looking for job, they are already in the military, okay? Now, I give you another example. You, student, you are between 15 and 64, but you are not labor force. You are here, okay, because you are not looking for job. Okay, you are still studying here, basically. So, in some cases, it's clear, black and white. But in other cases, it's a gray area, including the one that you asked. Suppose I'm doing internship, so you're a student, and then you're doing internship, but then you're paid. So, are you labor force or not? It all depends on the day that the census people come and then use you as a respondent. What is your answer? What is the question, and so forth? Okay? So, there is no sort of black and white. There's always gray areas here. Okay? But I think what is more important for you to understand is that if this manpower are looking for job actively or already looking, then they are in the labor force. So maybe that's the easiest way to summarize. So either you're already looking, which is here, you're here, or you're not looking but you're actively looking for job, then you're here. But if you're not actively looking for job, then you are not even in the labor force, you are in a non-labor force. So what I was about to say earlier is that what is called the unemployment rate, which is the small u in our model earlier, basically it's a ratio between the number of people here who are unemployed over the number of the labor force. So again, in 2014, it's 6.8 million divided by 120 million, and the answer is 5.7%. That is the official unemployment rate in Indonesia in 2014. Okay? Now, let me stress again. All depends on the definition used by different countries. What I'm giving you here is only the broad concept. Okay? And in some cases, the definition is really questionable. Questionable in the sense that, it's almost unbelievable that it is defined as it is. Let me give you an example. BPS in Indonesia, the way they define employed, so if you are here, then you are respondent and then you are asked by the BPS, basically employed defined as minimum 1 hour continuously during the last week. So imagine, suppose within the last 5 days, okay, I'm assuming 5 days are the working days for 1 week. If during those 5 days, okay, you work only 2 hours, just 2 hours for the entire 5 days, you are considered employed. That's our definition. You are not considered employed if the last 5 days you work only half an hour, only 30 minutes, then you are considered not employed. That's the definition in Indonesia. So every country has their own definition. So I don't know, it's all up to your interpretation. Do you think this makes sense, this definition? Whatever your position on this is that given this definition, the unemployment rate in Indonesia is 5.7%. And in fact, the latest figures for last year, 2019, is even more than 5%, in 4-point-something%. Okay.
Sir?
Yes.
I would like to ask about, because you mentioned how each country has different standards in determining which one should be considered manpower and which one should not. Does that mean it's relatively hard to compare a country's labor market with another?
Yes, that is a good point. Absolutely. It's not one-to-one comparison. By the way, you mentioned about manpower or non-manpower. That is not too serious. The more serious question is about the definition of labor force and non-labor force. Because the definition of manpower, usually it's only difference in 1-2 years between countries. So I wouldn't be too concerned about different definitions of the manpower. But this is really varies between countries. Okay. You heard about the terminology child labor, right? In many developing countries like in India or in Africa, there's a lot of child labor. And yet they are less than 15 years old. And they are considered as labor. So, you know, each country has different definition. Okay. Any other question on the definitions of the labor market and unemployment?
Sir, I have another question.
Yes.
What about social media influencers? They just work less than an hour. They don't even have to leave the house, and they get paid a huge ton of money. So, really does
That's a good point. You know, with all this new technology and so forth, I'm in a position to argue they need to redefine what is employment. Because of this new technology, these days many people work at home, thanks to the internet, right? So, you know, with all this new, this is almost like, imagine there's a race, right? Balapan. In Indonesian, it's called balapan race. Between what is going on in the labor market and those who collect the data of the labor market. And definitely the race was won by those who are in the labor market. Those who are collecting the data of the labor market is way behind. You know, so there are many things that needs to be sort of reassessed or reviewed, I think, with all this new development, social media, and many people work at home now and so forth. Oh, one other thing which is very important I forgot to mention. In many developing countries, like in Indonesia, even though you are employed here, okay, remember the definition here, 1 hour, even though you are employed, you can be considered as disguised unemployment. Now, what is the definitions of disguised unemployment? Well, the easiest way to explain is the following. Suppose you are a farmer, okay, and you have, let's say, 1 hectare land, your farm, okay, you have 1 hectare, and you have 5 people working there. So with the 5 people and 1 hectare, and let's assume your production is 10 ton, whatever it is, okay? So, let me repeat. 1 hectare land, 5 people working, production is 10 ton, okay? Now, suppose there are 2 other people, I don't know, maybe member of your family or friends or whatever, who get unemployed because they are laid off, okay? By the way, this happened a lot in 1997 during the Asian financial crisis. Many people, young people who used to work in the banking sector, financial sector, because those sectors are collapsed, went bankrupt. Many young people were laid off, and some of them went back to the village area, and then they joined their family working in the field and so forth. Okay? So let's assume there are 2 young people added to the list of the workers who work on the same 1 hectare. Okay? Remember, originally 5 people working there, but now 7 people. The same land, 1 hectare, used to be 5 people, but now 7 people. And guess what? The output is the same, 10 ton. So, if that is the case, then this additional 2 worker, it's called disguised unemployment. Because basically these 2 people, physically they may work. If you see them on the field, they're working whatever they're doing, but at least physically they look like they're working, but they don't contribute to the production. Because the production continues to be 10. So that is the disguise. And as I mentioned to you, in many developing countries, the number of disguised unemployment is so huge, okay? They don't know exactly, because it's so difficult to collect the data, especially for big countries like in Indonesia. But as long as you understand, out of those people who work, many of them are discussed.